Hello all, and welcome to some background information on Seneca's Phaedra. I hope you're all enjoying your fall break. I had originally wanted to give you this information in class on Wednesday before we departed, but we ran out of time talking about all of the horrors of Thyestes. So I wanted to make sure you had this little bit of background information before you got started reading Phaedra, or at least to read it in conjunction with Phaedra. I think that it'll explain some of the references that are made in the story, and will add a little bit of depth to the story of Theseus and his relationship with his third wife, Phaedra. Okay, so I'm starting us off with a family tree. As you all know, when it comes to Greek mythology, family trees are really critical, right? We're always interested in seeing how all of these famous heroes know each other, are related to each other, and then, of course, how those family connections lead to opportunities for tragedy. In this family tree, our main focus here is going to be Pasiphae. So that's how you say her name, Pasiphae. She is Phaedra's mother. Now, Pasiphae was married to King Minos. Minos was the king of Crete. And they had 3 legitimate children. All right, oldest daughter named Ariadne, a younger daughter named Phaedra, and a son named Androgeus. And we'll come back to him momentarily. In Seneca's play, he makes reference to a curse of Pasiphae that is somehow being passed on to Phaedra. And that curse took the shape of her unnatural lust for a bull. All right, so Pasiphae was cursed to fall in love with an actual bull, the animal. And in order to satisfy that lust, she asked an inventor, a famous inventor who happened to be living on Crete at the time, to build a cow outfit for her to wear. And I'm saying this, and I know it sounds very silly, but this is very much a story of sadness, and in some cases of true tragedy. Okay, so she builds this cow outfit. She manages to entice the bull to have sex with her in this cow outfit. And in the unity of Pasiphae and the bull, she gives birth to a monster, which we came to know as the Minotaur. So tower, the end of that word tower, is short for Taurus, and that means bull. And the Mino part of Minotaur, this part here, refers to Minos, King Minos. So this monster that was created by Pasiphae and her unnatural lust caused a lot of problems for Minos, and he eventually decided to keep it locked up in the castle on Crete. But instead of keeping it behind lock and key, like imprisoned, he actually built an elaborate labyrinth, a huge maze. So the Minotaur was in the center of the maze, and those people whom Minos wished to punish, he would force them into the labyrinth and seal off all the exits. And eventually they would wander their way into the center of the maze and be killed by the Minotaur, or the Minotaur would come out and find them as they were trying to escape and getting lost inside of this labyrinth. So it was truly terrifying. You know, we're talking a lot about the elements of horror that are reflected in Seneca's plays, but some of the punishments that we read about in Greek tragedy are themselves quite terrifying. Okay, so how does Theseus fit into all of this? So you might be surprised to learn that Theseus's connection to Phaedra's family begins quite a bit earlier than his actual marriage to Phaedra. So Theseus was from Athens, and earlier in our story, Minos and Pasiphae's son, Androgeus, went to Athens for some athletic games, something like the Olympics, and was accidentally killed in the course of competition. And the Cretans, the people from Crete, were so distraught they were looking for some way for the Athenians to pay restitution to them for the loss of their prince, because that's basically what he was. He was the next in line for the throne. The Athenians agree, and it depends on the story you're reading. The Athenians agree that either every year or every 9 years, they will send young men and young women from Athens to be sacrificed, essentially, to the Minotaur. So that is how they pay restitution to the Cretans for accidentally killing Androgeus. They send their young men and their young women to be eaten by this bull inside the labyrinth. So when Theseus comes of age, and he grows to be the Prince of Athens, and is in some ways looking for a quest, something to prove his worth and prove his strength, he essentially volunteers to be one of the sacrifices for the bull, for the Minotaur, and goes to Crete with the intention to kill the Minotaur and to cease this ongoing sacrifice of Athenian boys and girls. So that's what he does. He travels to Crete, and when he is there, he meets Ariadne, who is the oldest princess of the house, and Ariadne falls in love with Theseus, and he convinces her to help him kill her half-brother, the Minotaur. And what she does is offers him a ball of twine. So when he goes into the labyrinth, when he sneaks in at night by himself, he can unravel the twine as he winds his way through the maze to the middle of the maze where he'll find the Minotaur. So after he kills the Minotaur, he'll be able to follow his string as he winds it back up on the ball on the way back, so that he won't get lost in the labyrinth and die there. So in thanks for what Ariadne did for him, and in recognition that she was in love with him, Theseus steals Ariadne away at night after he kills the Minotaur, and she goes willingly with him, thinking that they're in love and they're going to go and get married. Okay, so we'll hold off on that for a minute. So Theseus is already involved with his family. So remember, Androgeus dies early on. Theseus comes to Crete to kill the Minotaur, and along the way he falls in love with, or just recognizes that Ariadne is in love with him, and very gratefully uses her help to kill this Minotaur and stop the obligation of the Athenians to keep sending boys and girls to Crete. So the images that we associate with Theseus and the Minotaur mostly focus on Theseus killing the Minotaur. So the Minotaur is always depicted as a human man, completely human except for his head, right? He has a bull's head. And so this red figure vase is probably our best look at what the Minotaur might have looked like in myth. And then on the middle picture here, this is a black figure vase, so we do know this is Theseus and the Minotaur because it's written here in Greek, Theseus and Minotaurus, so that means Minotaur in Greek. And here the painter has tried to depict the Minotaur as furry, right? So he still has a human body, and again in the red figure vase he had a tail in addition to his head, and here we have the head of a bull and a tail as well, but everything else about him appears to be human except for the fact that he has fur, right? So this red figure vase doesn't depict the fur, but the black figure vase does. On the far left here we have a depiction of the baby Minotaur. So you can see this little bull's head on top of the baby's body. Presumably he's there with Pasiphae as a baby being nursed by her. So the iconography of the bull is very closely connected to Theseus. This is one of the most famous exploits in his personal history. All right, so how do we get back to Phaedra? Like, how does she fit into this story? I mean, this is already pretty fantastic with Ariadne. Well, let's take a quick look at Theseus's marriage history, and I think this is important for understanding where Phaedra comes from at the end of our play in Seneca. So his relationship with Ariadne did not work. All right, so he did take her away from Crete with the intention, we think, of getting married. But what winds up happening is when they stop overnight on one of the Greek islands, just to sleep overnight to continue their journey in the morning, he abandons Ariadne on the island, and she wakes up to see him sailing away. So Ariadne actually has a pretty happy ending. Even though she was abandoned by the young man she thought she was in love with, the god Dionysus, whom we know because he is the god to whom the visitors to the Dionysia festival worship, the god Dionysus sees Ariadne abandoned on this island, falls in love with her, and marries her. So she actually does marry a god and has a pretty happy after story. After Ariadne, Theseus does actually get married. He marries an Amazon, and her name was either Hippolyta or Antiope, and he meets this Amazon while he's on another quest with his good buddy Hercules. In the Greek, we call him Heracles. So you all know Hercules, at least, are probably familiar with the name. They had a couple of different joint adventures, and going to the land of the Amazons was one of those adventures. So Theseus winds up marrying, we'll call her Hippolyta, and bringing her back to Athens, which actually incurs an invasion of the Amazons in Athens. They think that she was abducted, and they come to rescue her and begin a war with the Athenians. Hippolyta and Theseus have Hippolytus, his son, and we know a little bit more about him from our story, Hippolytus by Euripides. As for Hippolyta's end, it depends on the story, of course, but in Seneca, we get the impression that Theseus has killed her and has left Hippolytus without a mother. So this is how we eventually get to Phaedra. Phaedra is actually his third, not necessarily his third wife, but certainly his third liaison of sorts. Phaedra is Ariadne's sister, and we don't really have much word on how they get together. You know, what is the story of their marriage? We don't really know. All we know is that Phaedra is Hippolytus' stepmother, and she has 2 sons by Theseus, and we know that story from reading Euripides' version of that play. So this is just a little bit of background information. When Seneca makes reference to this curse of Pasiphae, all right, we do have to imagine, let's go back really quickly. We do have to think about the unnaturalness of lusting after someone or something you are not supposed to be attracted to. And what Seneca is perhaps more interested in than Euripides was is how that affects the person who is feeling this unnatural lust, and what do they do in response to that. So that's one connection we can make when we think about Phaedra in Seneca's version. Another thing to bear in mind is that the characterization of Theseus in Phaedra by Seneca is quite different from his characterization in Euripides. So understanding that he had at least 2 other sexual relationships, which seems most likely, before he meets Phaedra, informs the way that Seneca wants to characterize Theseus, and also to help us understand why Phaedra might be feeling lust or feeling sexual attraction for someone who's not her husband. All right, I hope you enjoy this play, and I'm looking forward to talking with you about it on Wednesday. Bye-bye.